Okay, so have you ever felt just like overwhelmed with all this advice, like how to be happier and uh, healthier and like
Yeah.
just better? You know what I mean?
Well, totally.
It's a lot, right?
Absolutely. It's like drinking from a fire hose.
I'm right. Like every day there's like a new like hack or a new like thing you should be doing.
New guru, a new book, a new everything.
And it's like, okay, I just want to know like what really works, you know? Like cut through all the noise.
Exactly. What's the real science behind all of this?
Yeah. So that's what we're going to be looking at today.
I like it.
A deep dive into like the actual science of personal transformation.
Awesome.
So no quick fixes here.
No, just the real deal.
Just the real stuff that actually makes a difference.
I love that.
And to really understand this, like how to really change, we're going to be focusing on like the mind-body connection.
That's like the key, right?
Yeah.
Like understanding how they work together.
It's not just like an interesting thing to think about. It's actually like once you understand it, you can really start to like take control of your well-being.
Absolutely. It's empowering.
Yeah. So we've got some really cool stuff to dive into today.
Oh, I'm excited.
So we're going to be looking at a YouTube conversation with this neuroscientist, Dr. Caroline Leaf.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of her.
She's like a leading expert in this field.
She's brilliant.
And then we're also going to be bringing in some ideas from this other source that looks at like the science and practice of personal transformation more broadly.
Okay. So like the nitty-gritty details from the brain expert and
Yeah.
the bigger picture stuff too.
Exactly. So we get like the whole picture, you know?
I love that.
So our mission today is to really like distill the most important things about how your mind like impacts your well-being and how you can actually like steer your own evolution, you know, like actually change.
That's a great way to put it. Steer your own evolution.
Yeah, and one of the big ideas that comes up in both of these sources is this notion of like interconnectedness.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's not like we're getting into a physics lesson or anything,
Not too deep.
but more like this overarching idea that everything's linked. And transformation, like real personal transformation, is about like shifting how you see yourself in the world.
Like a change in perception.
Exactly. And it all starts with understanding like the power of your mind.
Okay, so let's dive into that.
Yeah, let's unpack it.
Sounds good.
So the neuroscientist, she starts by talking about something that I think a lot of us get confused about.
What's that?
Like we use the words mind and brain kind of interchangeably,
Oh, yeah, like they're the same thing.
right? But she's like, no, those are two different things.
Okay, so what's the difference then?
So the brain is like the physical organ, you know, the one in your head.
Like the gray matter.
But the mind is way more than that.
Okay,
She describes it as like a gravitational field or a processing field.
interesting.
It's like your capacity to think and feel and make decisions.
So that's like the software running on the hardware of the brain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I like that analogy.
And she uses this really cool analogy to help us understand this.
Okay, let's hear it. Imagine a magnet under a piece of paper, and on top of the paper, you sprinkle iron filings.
Okay, I'm visualizing it.
So you can't see the magnetic force itself,
Right, it's invisible.
but you can see what it does.
Yeah, you see the iron filings move.
Exactly. They arrange themselves in a certain way because of that force.
yeah.
So she's saying our brain is like that physical magnet.
Okay.
And our mind is that invisible force field.
I see. Yeah.
It's what's making things happen.
And the iron filings are like our actions then.
Yeah, like our behaviors, the stuff we actually do.
That makes sense.
So the way we think and feel and make choices, that's our mind in action.
It's like our mind is shaping the way we experience and interact with the world.
Exactly. And here's the really important part.
Okay.
Our mind is always on. It's always working.
Like always processing in the background,
Yeah, it's constantly taking in information, making sense of things.
even when we're not consciously aware of it.
Right, exactly. And she's saying that it works through the brain.
Okay, so it's not like the mind is separate from the brain.
Yeah. Right? It uses the brain to express itself.
That's a really subtle but powerful distinction.
It really is. And this is why, like, learning to manage your mind is so important.
Because if our mind is always on, then we need to learn how to direct it.
Exactly. And that's where our well-being comes in.
It's if you're not in control of your mind, it's going to run wild and create chaos.
Yeah. And that's what can lead to all sorts of problems like stress and anxiety and even physical health issues.
So we need to learn how to be the pilot of our own minds.
Exactly. And our other source actually talks about this too.
really? How so?
They talk about energy fields and how our thoughts and emotions aren't just like these abstract things,
Okay.
but they actually have like an energetic quality.
So our thoughts and emotions have a real impact.
Yeah, and that brings us to like the power of our thoughts and this really amazing thing called neuroplasticity.
Okay, I've heard of neuroplasticity, but I'm not exactly sure what it means.
So basically it's like your brain's ability to change and adapt throughout your life.
So it's not like we're stuck with the brain we're born with.
No, not at all. It's constantly rewiring itself based on what we do and what we think.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and the neuroscientist, she explains it like this.
Okay, I'm listening.
She says that our mind takes our experiences and turns them into physical changes in our brain.
Wow, so our experiences actually shape the structure of our brain.
Yeah, and she says these changes are like protein tree-like structures.
Those teen trees.
Yeah, it's basically like our thoughts, you know?
So our thoughts are physical structures in our brain.
Exactly. And those structures are built from our memories.
Okay, so our memories are the building blocks of our thoughts.
Exactly. And that's why neuroplasticity is so important.
Because it means we can actually change our thoughts by changing our experiences.
And by changing the way we think about those experiences.
Right, because our thoughts are just interpretations of our experience.
Exactly. And she tells this really powerful story about a young girl.
Okay, I love stories.
This girl had a really severe traumatic brain injury. Yeah. And at first she was functioning like at the level of a second grader.
So like a lot of damage was done.
Yeah. But through very focused and intentional like mind management techniques,
Okay.
she not only caught up academically,
Really?
yeah, she graduated high school and then she even became like a math whiz.
Wow. That's incredible.
Isn't it amazing?
Yeah, it just shows you like how powerful our minds are.
Yeah, and to think that this whole concept of neuroplasticity, like when she started researching it in the 80s, people thought it was ridiculous.
Like they didn't believe it.
Yeah, they were like, the brain doesn't change once you're an adult.
But now we know that's not true at all.
Right, our understanding of the brain has come so far.
It's so exciting.
It really is. And it also shows us like how important our emotions are.
Oh yeah, our emotions are a huge part of this.
Right, because it's not just our thoughts that shape our brain.
It's our feelings too.
Exactly. And our other source, they talk about emotions as like these energetic frequencies.
Okay.
And the neuroscientist, she goes even deeper. She says that negative emotions can actually generate what she calls toxic photons.
Toxic photons, what are those?
So I don't know like the exact science of it,
Sure.
but the idea is that our negative feelings, they have like a real physical impact on our system.
So like stress can actually harm us.
Yeah, and this shows us like how interconnected our mind and body and immune system really are.
It's all one system.
Right, and she shares this really personal story about how her own glucose levels like spiked dramatically when she was going through a really stressful time with her family.
Oh wow, so she experienced this firsthand.
Yeah, and she was able to bring her glucose levels back down through conscious like mind management practices.
So she used her mind to heal your body.
Exactly, and it's not just glucose levels.
What else?
Our immune system can actually respond to negative thoughts like it responds to a virus.
Really?
Yeah, it can trigger inflammation in the body.
So our thoughts can make us sick.
They really can, and if we're not careful and we're not managing our thoughts and emotions effectively over time, it can have some pretty serious consequences.
Like what kind of consequences?
So she talks about how it can actually affect our DNA.
Our DNA?
Yeah, and it can even shorten our telomeres.
Yeah, I'm not sure what telomeres are.
So they're like these little protective caps at the end of our chromosomes.
Okay.
And they're kind of like indicators of our aging and our overall cellular health.
So like shorter telomeres mean we're aging faster?
Yeah, basically. And she showed this really striking image in her research.
What was it?
It was a brain scan of someone with severe depression.
Okay.
And their brain activity was like super low.
Oh, wow.
And their telomeres were really unhealthy.
So their mental state was affecting their physical health.
Yeah, but here's the good news.
Okay, tell me.
After just 9 weeks of consistent mind management practices,
Okay.
both their brain activity and their telomere health improved.
That's amazing.
Isn't it? It's
Yeah.
so incredible.
Yeah, it really shows you like how much power we have.
And it's really interesting because most of the research on telomeres has been about like diet and exercise.
Right, like lifestyle facts.
Yeah, but this shows that our mental well-being is just as important.
Maybe even more important.
It really challenges how we think about health, you know?
It does. It's not just about the physical.
Exactly. And speaking of challenging how we think, let's talk about what she says about mental illness.
Ooh. Okay. This is interesting.
Yeah, she has a really thought-provoking perspective on it.
What is it?
So she's saying that things like depression and anxiety,
Yeah.
they might not always be illnesses in the traditional sense,
Yeah.
but rather they're like normal signals.
Signal of what?
They're like our mind's way of telling us that something's not right.
So like they're messengers.
Exactly. And instead of just labeling them as diseases
Yeah.
and trying to like suppress them with medication,
Right.
she's saying maybe we should be listening to them.
Like trying to understand what they're trying to tell us.
Exactly. And she's not saying that medication is never helpful.
Sure.
But she's saying that if we're not addressing the root causes,
Yeah.
then it might not be a long-term solution.
And it might even have negative consequences.
Exactly. And we all experience difficult emotions.
Of course.
Especially when life gets tough.
Right.
But that doesn't mean we're automatically sick.
It's part of being human.
It is, and she brings up this really interesting statistic.
Tell me.
So life expectancy has actually been reversing since the mid-90s.
What? Really?
Yeah. And she says that a big contributing factor is what she calls deaths of despair.
Deaths of despair.
Yeah, it's basically deaths from preventable lifestyle diseases.
Okay.
And she's linking that back to our ability to manage our mental well-being.
So our mental health is literally affecting how long we live.
Yeah, it's a pretty big wake-up call.
It is. It makes
Yeah.
you realize how important this stuff is.
So if these challenges aren't necessarily illnesses,
Right.
then what can we do about them?
Yeah, that's the big question.
And that's where she introduces some really practical tools.
Okay, I'm all ears.
So she talks about this thing called the neurocycle.
The neurocycle.
Yeah, and it's not like a quick fix or anything. It's like a skill you can learn to actually manage your mind.
Like a mental workout.
Exactly, and she uses this analogy of a pilot and a co-pilot.
Okay, go ahead, follow it.
So the pilot is like that feeling of being overwhelmed.
It's like when you're in the middle of a panic attack?
Yeah, exactly. Like everything's chaotic.
Right.
And the co-pilot is like your inner wisdom.
Like the calm, rational part of you?
Yeah, and the neurocycle is about learning how to engage that co-pilot.
So you can take back control.
Exactly, and she breaks it down into 5 steps.
Okay, what are they?
So the first step is gather awareness.
Okay.
It's about becoming aware of your emotions.
Like, what am I feeling right now?
Yeah, and any physical sensations you're experiencing.
Like my heart is racing or my stomach is in knots.
Exactly, and your behavior patterns.
Like, am I withdrawing from people or am I lashing out?
Right, and your overall perspective on the situation.
Like, what's my story about this?
Yeah, so that's the first step, just becoming aware.
Okay, what's the second step?
The second step is reflect.
Reflect.
Yeah, so you take a deeper look at what you've become aware of.
Uh-huh.
You ask yourself questions like, why am I feeling this way?
So trying to understand the root cause.
Well, exactly. The third step is write.
Right.
Yeah. Or if writing isn't accessible for you at that moment, you can visualize or just articulate your thoughts and feelings out loud.
So like getting it out of your head.
Exactly, because when we keep things bottled up inside,
They can fester.
they can. And the fourth step is reconceptualize.
Reconceptualize. That's a big word.
Yeah, but basically it's about making sense of everything you've gathered and reflected on.
Okay.
You look for patterns, you challenge negative thoughts.
Like, are these thoughts really true?
Right, and you try to reframe the situation in a more helpful way.
So changing your perspective.
Exactly. And the final step is act.
Act
Yeah, so you take a small intentional step forward.
based on your new understanding.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that this isn't about ignoring or suppressing difficult emotions.
Right.
It's about accepting them as messengers.
They're trying to tell us something.
Exactly. And she also clarifies this common misconception about habit formation.
Okay, what's that?
So a lot of people say it takes 21 days to form a habit.
Yeah, I've heard that.
But she says that's not really true.
Oh,
She says you might start to see some changes in your thought patterns within 21 days.
So-
And there's actually a spike in gamma wave activity in the brain during that time.
gamma wave.
Yeah, it's like a type of brain wave that indicates heightened neural processing.
So your brain is working hard.
Yeah, but she says that real lasting change takes closer to 63 days.
So it's a longer process.
It is, it's about consistency.
Makes sense.
So it's not just about reacting to problems.
It's about being proactive.
Exactly, and she talks about self-regulation.
Self-regulation.
Yeah, it's like being aware of your thoughts and feelings and choices in the present moment.
Like checking in with yourself regularly.
Exactly. And she also introduces this really cool concept called brain building.
Brain building.
Yeah, it's like a way to build mental and physical resilience.
How do you do that?
So it involves using the neurocycle to really learn new things.
Okay.
And what's interesting is that when we learn new things, our brains create new nerve cells.
Okay.
But those nerve cells need to be strengthened
How do we strengthen them?
through deep thinking.
So if we don't use them, they just wither away.
Yeah, basically. And she says unused thoughts can become like toxic waste in the brain.
Wow, that's a powerful image.
It is, and it can mess with our sleep and our overall brain function.
So we need to keep our brains active.
Yeah, and she suggests like dedicating some time each day to learning something new.
Like reading a book or taking a class.
Exactly, and she even compares it to brushing your teeth.
Like it's something we should do every day for our brain health.
Exactly, and it's not just about intellectual stuff either.
What else?
Physical activities that challenge your coordination,
Like what?
like playing ping pong or learning a new dance.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, they can also contribute to brain building.
So it's about finding a balance.
It is, and for a lot of people, past trauma can be a big obstacle to transformation.
Yeah, trauma can be really debilitating.
And she talks about how healing from trauma involves acknowledging it, processing it, and then reconceptualizing it.
So not trying to forget about it,
Right, because you can't just erase the past.
but you can change how it affects you.
Exactly, and she uses this analogy of a toxic thought tree.
A toxic thought tree.
Yeah, so after a trauma, we might develop these negative thought patterns.
Like coping mechanisms.
Yeah, and they might have helped us survive at the time,
Right.
but over time they can become really limiting.
Like they keep us stuck.
They do, and she talks about this cocooning effect that can happen after trauma.
Cocooning.
Yeah, it's like our mind creates this protective barrier around us.
To keep us safe.
Exactly, but eventually we need to come out of that cocoon to really heal.
And she says recontextualization is like rewriting the narrative of our past.
Exactly, and she actually prefers the term release to forgiveness.
Release.
Yeah, and she even brings up the idea of quantum entanglement.
Wow, getting deep here.
Yeah, but basically she's saying that until we release the emotional ties to past hurts,
Yeah.
we're still connected to them in a way.
Like they still have power over us.
Exactly, and she shares this really beautiful Japanese concept called kintsugi.
Kintsugi.
Yeah, it's the art of repairing broken pottery with gold lacquer.
Okay.
And so the repaired object is actually more beautiful and stronger than it was before.
Wow, that's a powerful metaphor.
It is. It's about taking our broken pieces and making something even more beautiful out of them.
I love that.
And for parents, she has some really great advice.
Oh yeah, parenting is tough.
It is, and she says it's so important to validate our children's emotions.
Even if they seem silly to us.
Exactly, because when we dismiss their feelings, it can make them feel ashamed.
And that can lead to all sorts of problems.
It can, and we need to create a safe space for them to talk about anything.
Like without judgment.
Exactly. And the best way to teach them healthy emotional management is to model it ourselves.
So be the example.
Exactly. So to wrap up all this amazing information,
It's a lot to take in.
it is, but the key takeaways are that our minds are incredibly powerful
Right.
and our brains are constantly changing.
Neuroplasticity.
Exactly. And our emotions play a huge role in our overall well-being.
And we have the power to manage our minds.
Through tools like the neurocycle and brain building,
And we can heal from past trauma.
through reconceptualization and release.
It's really empowering.
It is, and it's important to remember that transformation is a journey.
It's not a destination.
Exactly, it's ongoing.
And it's unique to each of us.
So here's a final thought for you, our listener.
Say to me.
You have the ability to shape your reality
Wow.
by understanding and directing the power of your mind.
That's a big responsibility.
It is, but it's also a huge opportunity.
So what are you going to do with it?
Exactly. What small step can you take today to start taking control of your mental landscape?
That's a great question.
And if you're interested in learning more about all this,
Yeah.
we highly recommend checking out Dr. Caroline Leaf's work.
She's the neuroscientist we were talking about.
Yeah, she has a book called Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess
Okay.
and a podcast also called Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess.
I'll have to check those out.
And her website is dtaranyleaf.com.
Got it.
And she's on social media too.
Awesome. I'll look her up.
So remember, your journey is your own,
That's right.
and you have the power to create incredible transformation in your life.
Embrace the journey.
Absolutely.
I'm feeling inspired.
Me too.
Thanks for this deep dive. It was really insightful.
Yeah, this was a good one.
Until next time.